Have you ever realized the man sharing your bed is actually a monster? I spent 10 months thousands of miles away, risking my life in hostile zones to build our future. Meanwhile, he was using my blood, sweat, and credit to finance a kingdom of lies with another woman. This is not an ordinary tale of infidelity. It is a ruthless psychological game where the greedy hunter ultimately becomes the pathetic prey. Hello, everyone. Before today's story begins, we'd like to share a quick message. YouTube recently removed our monetization, cutting off our income. If you enjoy this story, we humbly ask for just $1 to help pay our staff so they can make a living and keep creating for you. Thank you for saving us. Now, let's begin the story. My name is Aaliyah Mills. I am 28 years old, and my world has always been built on order, precision, and survival. I work as a logistics coordinator for Aegis Global Relief, an international organization specializing in crisis management and rapid reconstruction in some of the most high-risk, volatile zones on the planet. While most people my age were figuring out their weekend plans, I was coordinating airlift schedules for medical supplies in regions where the air tasted like ash and anxiety. It was grueling, exhausting work, but it paid exceptionally well, and it gave me a sense of absolute purpose. That purpose, however, was always meant to serve a greater goal: my future with Marcus. When Aegis offered me a highly lucrative 10-month deployment overseas, it was a hard decision. 10 months is a lifetime when you are deeply in love, but the compensation was staggering, enough to secure our financial future and pay for the lavish wedding we had always talked about. So, I packed my tactical gear and kissed my fiancé goodbye, leaving him behind in our beautiful coastal city of Silvercliff. I wanted Marcus to feel completely secure while I was gone. He was a man of big dreams, always chasing that one golden entrepreneurial idea that would launch his career. I believed in him. I wanted to be the wind beneath his wings. So, before I boarded my flight, I did something I thought was an act of profound love. I paid the entire rent for our luxury downtown apartment for 1 full year in advance. I also handed him a sleek, black supplemental credit card linked directly to my primary account. I want you to focus entirely on developing your personal career, I told him, holding his hands in mine. Do not worry about the bills. Do not worry about groceries or the utilities. Just build your dream, and I will take care of the rest. Marcus had looked at me with tears in his beautiful eyes, calling me his angel, his savior. For the first 3 months, the illusion was flawless. Despite the 12-hour time difference and the chaotic nature of my work, Marcus was the perfect anchor. My phone would light up daily with long, affectionate messages. He would send me screenshots of wedding venues, asking if I preferred the rustic barn or the seaside cliff. Occasionally, a care package would arrive at my dusty base gourmet coffee, my favorite chocolates, a handwritten note smelling faintly of his cologne. I would sit in my cramped, sweltering bunk, utterly exhausted, holding his letters to my chest and feeling like the luckiest woman in the world. But around month 4, the foundation began to subtly fracture. It started as a slow fade, the kind you almost feel guilty for noticing. The daily morning paragraphs turned into brief evening texts. When I managed to call him on a secure line, his voice lacked its usual warmth. He was always distracted, typing frantically on his keyboard in the background. I am just swamped with this new breakthrough business project, babe, he would say, his tone clipping with impatience. This is the one. It is going to change our lives, but I have to put in the hours. I swallowed my disappointment and supported him, reminding myself that this was exactly what I had funded him to do. But then the nature of our conversations shifted entirely. He stopped talking about us and started complaining relentlessly about the life I had left him with. I cannot stand this apartment anymore, Aaliyah, he groaned one evening over a static-filled connection. The walls are paper-thin. The neighbors are so nosy. They watch my every move in the hallway. I cannot focus on my business here. I really need a more private space, somewhere quiet. I frowned, wiping sweat from my forehead after a 14-hour shift managing refugee logistics. Our Silvercliff apartment was a premium, concrete-walled penthouse, I had never heard a single neighbor in the 2 years we lived there. Maybe you can work from a private cafe during the day, I suggested gently. You do not understand, he snapped back quickly, a sharp edge to his voice that I had never heard before. It is fine. I will figure it out. He hung up shortly after. I sat alone in the dim light of my tent, thousands of miles away from the man I loved. A strange, cold knot of unease twisted in my stomach. I told myself it was just the distance, the stress of the deployment, the sheer exhaustion clouding my judgment. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, beneath the layers of my absolute trust in him, a quiet alarm was ringing in the dark. 6 months into my deployment, Aegis granted me a 14-day rotational leave. I was utterly exhausted, surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night, but the thought of returning to my fiancé kept me going. I wanted the comfort of his arms, a long hot shower, and the safety of the life we were building together. I caught a grueling 18-hour flight back to the States, practically vibrating with excitement as I landed in Silver Cliff. When I walked through the door of our apartment, dropping my heavy tactical duffel bags onto the hardwood floor, Marcus was waiting. He hugged me, but his embrace felt incredibly rigid. His posture was stiff, and his eyes darted around the room, actively avoiding mine. We sat down on the living room sofa, and before I could even tell him how much I missed him, he delivered a statement that made my blood run completely cold. I bought a house, he announced casually, as if he were telling me he had picked up milk from the grocery store. I blinked, my exhausted brain struggling to process his words. You did what? A single-family home, he continued, leaning back and crossing his arms over his chest. Right in the middle of Oak Ridge. It is a fantastic suburb, bustling, great property values, wonderful neighborhood. I just signed the final papers yesterday. The room started to spin. Purchasing a home was a massive, life-altering decision. It was the biggest financial commitment a couple could make, one we had explicitly agreed to navigate together after my deployment ended. My mind scrambled for a logical explanation. Marcus, how is that even legally or financially possible? What about a down payment? Whose name is on the mortgage? What are the interest rates? You cannot just buy a house like you are buying a pair of shoes. He waved his hand dismissively, his face tightening with immediate annoyance. Why do you always have to ruin everything with an interrogation? I handled it. It is a surprise for our future. You should be thanking me for taking the stress off your shoulders, so you can just come home and relax. I tried to calm my racing heart, forcing myself to take a deep breath. Okay, fine. Take me to see it. I want to see our new home right now. His demeanor changed instantly. A hard, cold look crossed his face. Absolutely not. You cannot go near that place right now. Why not? I asked, my voice rising in disbelief. Because the contractors are tearing the place apart, he snapped quickly. It is a total construction zone. There is drywall dust everywhere, exposed wires, and they are using heavy industrial sealants. The fumes are highly toxic. You have been breathing in sand and fuel exhaust for 6 months overseas. I am not letting you destroy your lungs on your time off. It is for your own good. It was the most absurd, over-engineered excuse I had ever heard. I stared at him, trying to find the man I had promised to marry, but he felt like a total stranger. And then, without missing a beat, he twisted the knife even deeper. Listen, he said, his voice dropping an octave into a tone of forced sweetness. Since my cash is completely tied up in the closing costs and the escrow accounts, I need a massive favor. I need you to extend the lease on this apartment and keep paying the rent for the next few months. Oh, and I had to order some custom luxury furniture for the new place. The interior designers needed a large deposit immediately. I used the supplemental card you gave me. You do not mind, right? It is an investment for our future. My mind screamed. He had bought a house without me, strictly refused to let me see it, and was now demanding I continue paying rent for an apartment he hated while secretly financing custom couches for a phantom home. Before I could even formulate a response to his outrageous financial demands, Marcus delivered the final, devastating blow. Actually, I have been thinking, he said smoothly. refusing to make eye contact as he picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "It might be best if we live separately until the wedding." "Live separately," I choked out, all the air leaving my lungs. "Are you insane?" "It makes total sense," he argued, his voice devoid of any emotional warmth. "I need absolute, unbroken quiet to manage these complicated renovations and get my business off the ground. Plus, you know my parents are deeply traditional. I feel incredibly ashamed setting up a life in a brand new house with a woman I am not legally married to yet. We need to respect those family boundaries." I was paralyzed. Nothing he said made a single shred of logical sense. He was perfectly fine living in sin in a luxury high-rise on my dime for years. But suddenly, a single-family home required a marriage certificate. He was actively isolating me, draining my financial resources, and keeping me entirely in the dark. That night, I lay wide awake in the bed we used to share. Marcus was fast asleep next to me, breathing softly. The man I loved was gone, replaced by a parasite playing a very dangerous game. My heart pounded against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of a sudden, sharp clarity. I slipped out from under the heavy covers, grabbed my laptop, and crept into the master bathroom, locking the door quietly behind me. I sat on the cold tile floor and opened a secure encrypted browser. My hands shook uncontrollably as I typed in the credentials for my comprehensive credit monitoring service. If he was hiding something financial, the raw data would tell the truth. The dashboard loaded, casting a harsh blue glow across my face. I stared at the screen, my breath catching painfully in my throat. My credit score, which I had fiercely protected and maintained at near-perfect levels since I was 18 years old, had plummeted by over 150 points. Beneath the blazing red numbers was a long, terrifying list of recent hard inquiries and massive debt originations, tens of thousands of dollars in high-interest personal loans, several new, maxed-out credit cards, all opened within the last 4 months, all completely hidden from me, all legally in my name. The cracks in the mirror had finally shattered, revealing a monster staring right back at me. I did not scream. I did not storm back into the bedroom, tear the blankets off his sleeping body, and demand an explanation. In my line of work, when a bomb goes off, the people who survive are not the ones who run around screaming. The survivors are the ones who assess the damage, calculate the structural integrity of the room, and find a way out. I closed the laptop, wiped the cold sweat from my forehead, and walked back into the bedroom. I slid under the covers next to the man who was actively destroying my life, closed my eyes, and forced myself to breathe evenly for the next 5 hours. The following morning at 8 o'clock, Marcus kissed my cheek and left for his supposed business meetings. The moment the front door clicked shut, my tears dried up completely. I was no longer a heartbroken fiancé. I was a crisis manager dealing with a hostile threat. Instead of confronting him, I reached out to a ghost. Through my secure network at Aegis, I contacted a former federal investigator turned private detective named Vance. He was expensive, discreet, and ruthless. I wired him a retainer of $10,000 from a private offshore account I kept for emergencies, one Marcus knew absolutely nothing about. My instructions were incredibly simple. Follow him 24 hours a day for exactly 1 week. Document every location, every transaction, and every single person he speaks to. For 7 agonizing days, I played the role of the exhausted, naive partner perfectly. I smiled when Marcus came home late, smelling of expensive wine and a perfume that definitely did not belong to me. I nodded sympathetically when he complained about how stressful his new business venture was. I even transferred another $5,000 into his account when he claimed the contractor needed more funds for the toxic drywall removal at the new house. Every time I looked at his handsome, lying face, I felt a physical sickness in my stomach, but I kept my mask securely in place. On the 8th day, I met Vance at a dimly lit diner on the outskirts of the city. He slid a thick, heavy manila folder across the sticky laminate table. "You are going to want to drink your coffee before you open that," Vance said, his voice gravelly and devoid of pity. I flipped the folder open. The first few pages were financial records, deeply buried documents that took serious effort to unearth. The new house in Oak Ridge was not in Marcus's name. It was not in my name either. The deed was registered to a mysterious shell company called Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC. Look at the formation documents, Vance instructed, tapping a thick, calloused finger on the third page. I read the paperwork, and the sheer audacity of his betrayal hit me like a physical blow to the chest. Before my deployment, I had signed a general power of attorney document, leaving it with Marcus purely for medical emergencies, or in case my signature was needed for our apartment lease while I was unreachable in a war zone. He had taken that document, weaponized it, and stolen my social security number. He used my immaculate credit history to register the LLC, legally binding me as the primary financial guarantor, while naming himself as the managing director. He had taken out a commercial residential loan of $850,000. The horrific truth clicked into place. I was entirely responsible for the massive, crushing debt, but because of the way he structured the LLC's operating agreement, he held the keys to the kingdom. "Turn the page," Vance said quietly. I flipped to the surveillance photographs. There was my fiancé, standing on the manicured lawn of a beautiful, sprawling suburban home. But he was not alone. Clinging to his arm was a woman. She looked to be about 55 years old. She was dressed in an impeccably tailored designer suit, her posture radiating arrogance and absolute control. In the next photo, they were kissing passionately against the hood of a luxury sports car. In another, she was standing inside the half-finished living room, aggressively pointing at paint swatches and barking orders at a team of terrified contractors. "Her name is Eleanor," Vance explained. "She is a senior executive at the investment firm where Marcus supposedly pitched his business. She is wealthy, highly manipulative, and she likes young, ambitious men who follow orders. She is his boss, Aaliyah, and she is the one paying for the custom Italian leather sofas he ordered on your credit card." I stared at the photographs, my vision blurring at the edges. The entire puzzle was finally solved, and the picture it formed was utterly grotesque. This was never about a surprise house for our future. It was a calculated, cold-blooded financial slaughter. Vance leaned forward, his eyes locked onto mine. "Here is their endgame. They are using your pristine credit to secure the property and fund the initial renovations through the LLC. Once the house is perfectly finished, they plan to bleed your remaining liquid assets dry. When your accounts hit zero, Marcus will suddenly declare that the pressure of the relationship is too much. He will break off the engagement. He and Eleanor will transfer the physical asset out of the LLC through a secondary corporate loophole, leaving you holding a shell company drowning in nearly $1 million of toxic debt. You will face absolute bankruptcy, federal tax audits, and the total destruction of your security clearance for your job. They will walk away into the sunset in a fully paid, luxury home. I sat in the diner booth, the faint smell of burnt grease and cheap coffee swirling around me. A week ago, I would have broken down sobbing. I would have called my mother. I would have screamed at the heavens about the unfairness of it all. But the woman who had kissed Marcus goodbye 10 months ago was dead. She died the moment I saw those credit reports in the bathroom. I looked down at the photograph of Marcus kissing Eleanor. He looked so smug, so entirely confident that he had outsmarted the woman risking her life overseas to support him. He thought I was just a reliable bank account, a foolish, trusting workhorse who would blindly sign whatever he put in front of her. I closed the manila folder and slid it back into my leather bag. A profound, terrifying calmness washed over me. The pain was completely gone, replaced by a razor-sharp, freezing rage. I did not want an explanation anymore. I did not want an apology. I wanted absolute, unmitigated destruction. "Thank you, Vance," I said, my voice steady and cold. "Your contract is complete." "What are you going to do?" he asked, a hint of genuine concern flickering in his eyes. "I am going to do what I do best," I replied, sliding a final envelope of cash across the table to cover his expenses. "I am going to manage the crisis, and then I am going to burn his entire world to the ground." The last 2 days of my rotational leave were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I packed my tactical gear, kissed Marcus on the cheek, and told him how incredibly proud I was of his entrepreneurial spirit. I even transferred an additional $15,000 into his personal checking account, smiling brightly as I told him to use it for the toxic drywall removal he had lied about. He looked at me with those big, grateful eyes, completely convinced he was reeling in the ultimate catch. He thought I was just a blind, devoted bank account. On my final evening in Silvercliff, right before the private car arrived to take me to the airport for my flight back to the Middle East, I pulled a thick stack of legal documents from my briefcase. I dropped the heavy pile onto the kitchen island with a loud, authoritative thud. "What is all this?" Marcus asked, eyeing the papers with a hint of annoyance. He was already dressed for a supposed late-night strategy meeting, wearing a tailored suit I knew he had bought with my money to impress Eleanor. "Just bureaucratic nightmare fuel from Aegis," I sighed, rubbing my temples as if I had a massive headache. Because of my international hazard pay and the new overseas tax regulations, the organization's legal team needs us to file a joint declaration of assets. It is a strict cost optimization strategy. They are trying to shield my income from heavy federal deductions. Since we share the apartment lease and the credit accounts, they need your signature on a few of these pages to prove we are a single financial household. It is incredibly boring, but it will save us nearly $40,000 in taxes next year. I watched him carefully. I knew exactly how to play him. If I told him it was about saving money for our future, his greed would instantly override any sense of caution. He hated reading legal jargon, and he possessed an arrogant, unshakable belief that he was always the smartest person in the room. He let out a dramatic groan, checking his heavy gold watch. "I am going to be late for my meeting. Aaliyah, do I really have to read all of this right now?" "No, of course not," I said soothingly, handing him my expensive fountain pen. "Just sign where the yellow sticky notes are. The lawyers already highlighted the required fields." What Marcus did not know was that buried deep within that stack of tax declarations, right around page 47, was a very specific, ironclad legal document prepared by a cutthroat corporate attorney I had hired the day before. It was a complete, irrevocable transfer of ownership. By signing those pages, Marcus was legally resigning as the managing director of Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC, waiving all his rights and transferring 100% of the company's control, assets, and liabilities strictly into my name. He did not even glance at the headers. He flipped through the pages rapidly, scribbling his signature on the yellow tabs with a careless flourish. He handed the pen back to me, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just signed away the keys to his fraudulent kingdom. "Done?" he smiled, leaning in to kiss my forehead. "Have a safe flight back to the sandbox. Babe, I will miss you." "I will miss you too," I whispered. 12 hours later, I was back at my secure base halfway across the world, sitting in a climate-controlled communications tent. The moment I received the encrypted confirmation that my attorney had successfully filed the newly signed LLC transfer documents with the state registry, I launched the second phase of my operation. I logged into my banking portals and initiated a complete financial lockdown. I drained every single penny from our joint checking and savings accounts, transferring over $250,000 into a secure anonymous trust fund that my lawyer had set up. Next, I logged into my credit card dashboard. I reported the supplemental black card I had given Marcus as stolen, flagging it for severe fraudulent activity. I explicitly instructed the bank to freeze the account entirely and freeze my credit profile so no new lines of credit could be opened. 2 days later, my phone began to ring incessantly. It was Marcus. I let it ring 5 times before answering, injecting pure, unadulterated panic into my voice. "Marcus, thank God you called," I cried out breathlessly. "Something terrible has happened." "Aaliyah, my card just got declined at the hardware store. The cashier said the account was frozen. What is going on?" His voice was tight with irritation and rising panic. "We have been hacked," I lied smoothly. "Someone stole my identity while I was traveling back to the base. The bank saw multiple massive charges in Silvercliff and locked everything down. The fraud department told me it might take up to 3 months to investigate and clear the accounts. We cannot touch any of the money until the federal review is over. There was a dead, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear his brain short-circuiting. He had a house full of contractors demanding payment, custom furniture orders pending, and zero access to my funds. 3 months, he finally choked out. But I have bills. My business needs cash right now. I am so sorry, sweetheart, I said, forcing a sob. I am totally helpless out here. You are just going to have to hold the fort until I get back. You are a brilliant businessman. I know you will find a way to manage. I hung up the phone and smiled. According to the daily surveillance reports, Vance was still sending me. The pressure cooker I had created was working flawlessly. Eleanor, accustomed to having everything her way, was growing furious with the delays on her dream home. She threw a massive fit when the interior designers threatened to cancel the order for their $50,000 custom kitchen cabinets because Marcus's card bounced. Desperate to keep his wealthy mistress happy and convinced he still owned the house, Marcus made the fatal mistake I had been counting on. He convinced Eleanor to drain her own personal liquid savings to cover the immediate construction costs, promising he would pay her back the second my fake fraud investigation was cleared. But even her deep pockets were not enough to cover the extravagant lifestyle they were building. Cornered, arrogant, and blinded by the promise of a massive payout when I returned, Marcus resorted to the absolute worst option available. He reached out to a syndicate of unregulated, hard money lenders operating in the city's underbelly. These were not banks. These were dangerous men who charged predatory interest rates and broke legs when payments were missed. He borrowed a staggering $150,000 from them to finish the luxury landscaping, install the smart home security systems, and buy the imported Italian marble for the master bathroom. He was funding a palace he no longer owned, using money he did not have, borrowed from people he could not cross, all to impress a woman who would abandon him the second he was no longer useful. He thought he was the puppet master pulling the strings of my life. He had no idea he was dancing right into a meat grinder. Exactly 3 weeks after I initiated the total financial freeze, my phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was Marcus. "Hey, babe," the text read. "I landed a massive meeting. I have to go on a 1-week overseas business trip to pitch a huge client. The island has terrible reception, so I might be completely off the grid. Love you so much." I stared at the screen, a cold, sharp smile spreading across my face. I immediately sent a secure message to Vance. Within 5 minutes, my private investigator replied with a confirmed flight manifest. Marcus was not going on a business trip. He and Eleanor were boarding a first-class flight to a luxury, secluded resort in the Caribbean to celebrate the completion of their stolen dream home. The moment the wheels of their commercial Boeing lifted off the runway, severing their digital connection to the outside world, my trap violently snapped shut. Step 1 was the property itself. As the sole, legally undisputed managing director of Apex Horizon Holdings, LLC, I held the absolute legal right to liquidate the company's assets. I did not bother with real estate agents, staging, or open houses. I directly contacted a corporate cash home buyers agency operating heavily in Silver Cliff. These investment groups are entirely predatory. They buy properties instantly, asking absolutely no questions, provided the price is extremely low. I offered them a pristine, newly renovated, single-family home in a highly desirable neighborhood at exactly 20% below the current market value. The only condition I demanded was a brutal, non-negotiable 48-hour closing window. The investors thought I was a desperate corporate seller facing an imminent bankruptcy. I let them think exactly that. I signed the electronic closing documents from my secure laptop while eating a dry ration pack in my command tent thousands of miles away. The massive cash payout was wired into my hidden offshore trust within hours, completely paying off the commercial mortgage and leaving me with a staggering amount of liquid profit. Step 2 was the purge. I am a master of rapid crisis logistics, and coordinating the extraction of high-value assets from hostile territory is my specialty. Before the title officially transferred and I had to hand over the physical keys to the new corporate buyers. I hired a ruthless, high-speed estate liquidation company. I gave Vance temporary access codes to the Oak Ridge property to supervise the operation. I gave the liquidators one very clear, merciless directive: strip the interior to the bone. Over the course of 12 frantic hours, a fleet of heavy-moving trucks descended upon the quiet suburban street. The workers hauled away the custom Italian leather sofas that Eleanor had emptied her personal savings for. They unbolted the 85-inch OLED televisions from the living room walls. They carted off the imported marble dining tables, the designer silk rugs, the absurdly expensive smart home security hubs, and every single piece of luxury decor Marcus had bought using borrowed mob money. The liquidation team sold everything at rapid wholesale auction prices and wired the cash directly into my new, secure accounts. When they locked the front doors for the final time, the magnificent house was a hollow, echoing shell. Step 3 was the execution. While the Oak Ridge house was being systematically gutted, I compiled my final gift for Marcus. It was not a love letter. It was a dense, flawlessly organized, 100-page dossier of absolute ruin. It contained certified copies of the forged power of attorney documents. It held the fraudulent loan applications bearing my stolen Social Security number. I included network logs tracking the credit card fraud directly to his personal laptop, and high-resolution surveillance photographs of him conducting illegal wire transfers. I shipped 2 heavily encrypted priority overnight packages. The first went straight to the white-collar crime division of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The second landed directly on the desk of the local Silver Cliff chief of police. I made sure to extensively highlight his sudden financial connection to the city's violent, unregulated street lenders, virtually guaranteeing that heavy law enforcement would be actively hunting him the second he returned to American soil. Step 4 was the erasure. I did not want to just leave him. I wanted to cease existing in his universe entirely. I paid a massive penalty fee to legally break the lease on our downtown apartment 3 months early. I hired a local crew to pack up everything that belonged to me and ship it to a secure, undisclosed storage facility. As for Marcus, I ordered the crew to shove his cheap suits, his cologne, and his useless entrepreneurial books into black plastic garbage bags and hurl them into the filthy dumpsters in the alley behind the building. Finally, I systematically dismantled my digital identity. I permanently deleted all of my social media profiles. I shut down every shared email account. I took the SIM card out of my secure phone, snapped it cleanly in half, and tossed the plastic shards into a roaring burn barrel outside my tent. When Marcus landed back in the United States, Aaliyah Mills would be nothing more than a ghost who had completely destroyed his life. 7 days later, Marcus and Eleanor returned from their tropical paradise. I received the real-time updates from Vance, who was parked discreetly down the street from the Oak Ridge property. According to Vance, they pulled up to the driveway in an expensive rideshare, deeply tanned and laughing, likely fantasizing about drinking champagne on their custom luxury sofas. Their laughter died the second they stepped out of the car. The manicured lawn was gone. A heavy industrial chain-link fence surrounded the entire perimeter. A bright yellow sign reading "Private Property" was bolted to the front gate. There was a blue minivan parked where Marcus usually parked his car, and a child's plastic tricycle sat right on the front porch. Marcus furiously punched in the keypad code for the front door. Nothing happened. The entire smart lock system had been ripped out and replaced with heavy brass deadbolts. He completely lost his mind. Vance watched him pace the sidewalk, screaming into his phone as he dialed my number over and over again. All he got was the hollow, dead tone of a disconnected line. Then, his phone chimed. It was a single, scheduled email from a masked proxy server I had set up before destroying my old digital footprint. He opened it with trembling fingers. There was no long, emotional paragraph. There was only a high-definition photograph of a massive corporate cashier's check made out strictly to my new trust fund for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Beneath the photo was a single sentence: "Thank you for decorating my house for free." According to the frantic public records that surfaced a few days later, Marcus immediately sprinted to a high-powered real estate attorney, demanding to sue me for everything I owned. The lawyer took one look at the stamped, notarized corporate transfer documents Marcus had blindly signed on our kitchen island and practically laughed him out of the office. He had legally, willingly gifted me absolute control of the asset. He had zero rights, zero equity, and zero recourse. But losing the house was only the first ripple of the shockwave. As he stood on the pavement outside the lawyer's office, his phone rang. It was not me. It was a federal agent from the white-collar crime division, politely informing him that he was the primary target of an active federal investigation for grand larceny, wire fraud, and aggravated identity theft. Cornered, drowning in hundreds of thousands of dollars of illicit mob debt, and staring down the barrel of a federal prison sentence. Marcus sprinted to the only lifeline he thought he had left. He ran to Eleanor's towering corporate office, begging for a massive cash bailout to pay off the unregulated lenders who were surely already looking for him. He drastically underestimated the absolute ruthlessness of a wealthy, powerful woman protecting her own empire. The moment Eleanor realized her young, handsome toy was totally broke, tied to organized crime, and radioactive with federal fraud charges, she flipped a switch. She did not offer him a single dime. Instead, she fired him right there in the glass-walled conference room. When he fell to his knees and begged, she simply picked up her desk phone and called building security. 2 massive guards dragged him out by his collar and threw him onto the concrete sidewalk to ensure her name stayed completely out of the federal indictments. Jobless, homeless, and terrified, Marcus wandered back to our old apartment building in the pouring rain. His credit cards were entirely frozen. His pockets were empty. He begged the landlord to let him inside, only to be told the lease was legally terminated and new tenants were moving in. The landlord pointed toward the back alley. That is where I saw him for the final time. I was not in a dusty tent in the Middle East. I was sitting in the back of a sleek, black, bulletproof town car parked quietly in the shadows of that very same alley. I held a warm cup of gourmet coffee, watching through the tinted glass as Marcus waded into the filthy, overflowing dumpsters. He was sobbing uncontrollably, clawing through rotten food and wet trash, trying to salvage his ruined designer suits and waterlogged business books. Suddenly, the harsh reflection of flashing red and blue lights bounced off the wet brick walls. The deafening wail of police sirens pierced the alleyway. 2 patrol cruisers swerved around the corner, spotlighting the pathetic, shivering man crying in the garbage. The local police had received my fraud dossier, and the unregulated lenders had undoubtedly tipped them off to his location. I took a slow, satisfying sip of my coffee. The bitter taste was completely gone, replaced by the sweet, absolute flavor of total victory. I tapped my knuckles against the privacy glass separating me from the driver. "Drive," I said softly. The luxury car pulled away smoothly, leaving the ashes of a traitor behind in the rain, and carrying me forward into a beautiful, unburdened freedom. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. We hope you enjoyed it. As an ad-free channel, your support is what keeps us alive. Please support Zoe Revenge Stories with just $1 via the QR code on the screen, or click the link in the description box or pinned comment. Also, we'd love to connect with you. Please leave a comment telling us which city or state you're listening from. Thank you for standing with us, and see you in the next stories.